Sometime in the cold breath of early morning, the earth above Millfield trembled with the quiet crunch of two elderly footsteps. Martha and Harold Collins pushing through dew-soaked weeds toward the inheritance they never expected. The world felt heavier than the autumn sky hanging low above them, their aching joints protesting each step as they crossed the forgotten acreage of Edgar Whitmore, the distant relative whose name barely lingered in family memories. The land around them was a wilderness swallowing decades of abandonment, tangled vines, half-collapsed fence posts, and a silence so absolute it felt sacred. They had come expecting nothing more than wasted land, maybe a patch of timber, maybe an old shed clinging to its last beam. But then Martha's foot struck something solid beneath the undergrowth, a hard, deliberate shape hidden under vines. With fearful curiosity, they pulled away the growth and uncovered a concrete hatch sealed into the earth like a secret waiting 70 years for their hands. The metal handle groaned when Harold grasped it, as if the buried world below was exhaling for the first time in half a century. And when the hatch cracked open, releasing a breath of air preserved since the 1950s, they knew this was no broken cellar. This was something intentional, something designed, something waiting for them. The concrete stairs descended into darkness like a forgotten tunnel into time, each step untouched by moisture or decay. Harold's pale flashlight beam skimmed across paneled walls, polished floors, and fixtures frozen in perfect mid-century stillness. It wasn't a bunker, it was a home. A complete underground residence sealed like a time capsule beneath the very ground they had thought was worthless. The kitchen gleamed with chrome appliances whispering of another era, the refrigerator humming softly as if it had never been turned off. The living room held magazines dated 1953, their edges crisp, their ink unfaded. A rotary phone waited on a side table, a silent witness to decades of silence. Martha touched a counter with trembling fingers, certain it would crumble into dust, but it didn't. Everything was immaculate, preserved by the obsessive caution of a man who had feared the end of the world. And deeper inside, past the tidy rooms and silent hallways, they discovered an office, its walls plastered with bomb-test headlines and Cold War maps. On the desk lay a leather-bound journal whose ink looked freshly dried. It was Edgar's journal, his obsession, his fear, his plans. And in those pages was a line that made Martha gasp and clutch Harold's arm. Moved the last of the artworks to the vault rooms. The Picasso sketch and Monet study are now secured. The vault door at the end of the corridor looked like it belonged in a bank buried beneath the earth. Edgar had left the combinations hidden behind a family photograph, as if inviting only someone with his blood to solve the riddle. When Harold spun the dial, the lock released with a low metallic sigh, and the vault opened into a room lined with crates and boxes labeled in the careful script of a man protecting civilization's treasures from a future he feared would burn. Roman coins, Ming Dynasty porcelain, gemstones wrapped in silk, gold bars stacked neatly like bricks of sunlight. Every crate was a quiet explosion of history, wealth, and intention. Each label carried purchasing dates from the 1940s and 50s with appraisals that, adjusted for modern value, were staggering. But it was the next vault that truly stole their breath. Inside was a private art gallery, perfectly climate-controlled despite the sealed decades. A Picasso with brushstrokes alive in the dim light. A Monet that shimmered as if painted yesterday. A Degas pastel soft as whispered movement, and anchoring the far end of the room, protected by its own sealed case, was a Renaissance portrait whose presence felt holy. The signature, the research, the documentation, all of it said the same impossible truth. A lost Leonardo da Vinci, hidden beneath the soil of Millfield, waiting for the day someone brave or desperate enough would break the seal. Their discovery should have been a blessing, but word slipped into the world like poison. First came the news vans swarming their street, cameras flashing through windows that had once looked out only on quiet mornings. Then came the threats, letters promising harm if they didn't hand over the real treasure maps that conspiracists imagined Edgar had left behind, calls at 2 a.m. from unknown voices whispering promises of violence. Strangers prowled their yard at night, drawn by rumors of hidden gold. Lawsuits materialized like storm clouds, relatives claiming false lineage, auction houses claiming fraud, even foreign governments demanding the return of paintings they insisted had been stolen generations earlier. The FBI intervened, sealing the underground home and stationing agents around the Collins' modest house. But danger followed. In relentless waves, one night 3 masked men broke through their back door shouting for vault codes, convinced even greater treasures lay hidden. Federal agents stopped them, but fear had already seeped into Martha's bones. Their peaceful lives were gone, replaced by shadows of greed, envy, and desperation that hovered like vultures circling a find too valuable for ordinary hands. And yet, even in fear, Harold felt a duty growing inside him, a responsibility heavier than gold. Then hope appeared at their kitchen table in the form of Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the elegant director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, who saw through the chaos and into Edgar's original intention. She spoke not of selling, not of hoarding, but of preserving and sharing, transforming their inheritance from a storm of danger into a legacy of purpose. She explained how a foundation could protect them legally, financially, and physically while allowing Edgar's collection to breathe in public light instead of hiding in silence underground. Museums would pay to display the pieces. Scholars would protect and study them. The collection would belong to the world, not to criminals, not to claimants, not to secrecy. But the decision came with weight. It meant letting go of financial fantasies in favor of responsibility. It meant trusting strangers. It meant stepping into a world they had never imagined for themselves. Martha thought of Edgar's words, preserved in ink. These works of art were meant to be shared. And in that quiet sentence, she found clarity. When the community briefly turned against them, accusing them of selfishness, demanding they sell the treasures for local profit, it was a shy gas station attendant named Tommy who stood up and reminded everyone of the quiet kindnesses Harold and Martha had shown for decades. In that moment, the couple understood. They weren't protecting a collection. They were protecting what it meant to give. Months later, the buried house beneath the fields was no longer a magnet for danger. The vaults had been catalogued, secured, and transported into the world under the name the Edgar Whitmore Foundation for Art Preservation and Public Education. The Leonardo headlined a global exhibition titled Hidden Treasures, Art Saved from the Shadows, drawing crowds that stretched around museum blocks. Masterpieces once hidden from humanity now shone beneath gallery lights, their colors reborn after 7 decades of darkness. Harold and Martha watched from the sidelines, humbled spectators to a legacy they had never sought. But the greatest transformation wasn't happening in New York. It was unfolding back in Millfield. With foundation funds and museum partnerships, the abandoned elementary school was reborn as a state-of-the-art museum. The old high school became an arts education center where rural children handled original artifacts and painted beneath skylights built to mimic Renaissance studios. Scholarships multiplied. Young people who once felt trapped by poverty now walked hallways lined with history, ambition, and possibility. The collection was powerful, yes, but the ripples it created were even stronger. Over the years, Millfield evolved from a forgotten rural dot into a cultural beacon. Tour buses arrived daily. Scholars traveled from across the country to touch the history Edgar had rescued. The community, once fractured by fear and suspicion, united around a shared identity, protectors of beauty, guardians of a legacy once sealed in concrete. Harold and Martha watched children gather wide-eyed before the Monet water lilies, teenagers studying brushstrokes of artists they had once only known from textbooks, families wandering halls filled with treasures once locked away in darkness. And slowly they understood the greater truth. The world had not given them this inheritance to save themselves. It had given it so they could save others. Even in old age, they walked the museum grounds with quiet pride, seeing in every visitor the outcome of a choice they'd nearly been too frightened to make. Edgar's fear of the world ending had built the underground sanctuary. Their courage transformed that sanctuary into a beginning. And so the story of Martha and Harold Collins, two ordinary souls who stumbled onto unimaginable fortune buried beneath their feet, became something larger than a discovery. It became proof that the greatest treasures are not the ones locked in vaults, but the ones we unlock for others. Their once leaking roof, their aging hands, their quiet nights of worry, every hardship had prepared them for a moment where doing the right thing mattered more than wealth. From a sealed bunker of fear, they built a culture of hope. From forgotten land, they raised a community. From a hidden masterpiece, they created a legacy that will outlive them by centuries. And if their journey moved you, if their courage, generosity, and resilience touched something inside you, make sure to like this story, share it,